This is your Pain Game podcast, where we talk about the game of living in and with chronic pain and trauma, getting to the heart of how to heal. I am your host, Lyndsay Soprano. On this show, I plan on discussing with doctors, chronic pain patients, holistic practitioners, loved ones, and anybody that is interested in having their voice heard in the chronic pain and trauma world that we live in. So here in the United States of good USA America, we are unfortunately used to school shootings. My sweetie has been in broadcasting. If you listen to the show, you know he's been in broadcasting for over 30 years now, and that doesn't age me. It only ages him. But he has to report on a mountain of horrific things that happen in our country and around the world. And one of those topics that's terrible for him to report and for me to listen to and to get used to are all of these school shootings, right? And they're starting to become a norm here in the United States of America. And I hate that that's the case. I'm not going to go down my whole gun speak right now and get on a soapbox because that's for a different day. But many of us do remember Columbine. It's kind of a nasty term here in the United States because it was kind of the first one that really shook us, shook us to our core. It was April 30th, 1999. And it seems like it was just yesterday, but it seems like a long time ago and not much has changed. And it was a school shooting. If you aren't familiar with it, it was a school shooting and attempted bombing occurred at Columbine High School in Colorado. And the shooters killed 12 students and another teacher, and over 20 additional people were injured trying to escape. My guest today lived through and around what happened at Columbine and also has lived through, geez Louise, guys, get ready, massive amounts of tragedy, perhaps forming his initial inclination to start using and becoming a drug addict. I don't know, just guessing. There are always reasons for all of the things that we get into all of our shenanigans, right? From friends dying in car accidents, suicide, drug overdoses. He is not a stranger to death and how that has affected him and in his life and the trajectory of where he is today. Drugs kind of became his life, his answer and his solution to pain and trauma. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my handsome AF guest today, Adam Vibe, best middle name ever, Gunton.
Lyndsay, thanks so much for having me. Great to see
hey,
you.
Brady, how are you?
I'm doing excellent. A lot better than I was in drug addiction.
No kidding. Adam is the author of the book From Chains to Saved. He's also the founder of the company Recovered on Purpose and the host of the podcast, The Recovered on Purpose Show. And I love the word purpose because, as my listeners know, I have decided to use pain as my purpose. And he has done the same thing in his world. And after overcoming homelessness and IV drug addiction, he has set out on a mission to help as many addicts find recovery as possible. His company equips addicts in recovery to share their stories powerfully with the world to send a message of hope. So I am rolling out the red carpet for you, baby. And I know we kind of talked about a little bit about bringing in Columbine because everybody knows that I wanted to pull on some heartstrings with that. But I know that's not your whole entire story. But I'd like to start with your experience as a young junior high kid in Columbine and what happened and its initial effect on you. And then what led up to, obviously, November 6th of 2017, your self-professed darkest hour of your life. And then let's take it from there.
Yeah, I loved where I grew up, and I want to make it clear that with Columbine was an incredibly powerful place for me to come from. I want to make that clear because not only did I experience something that was extremely, extremely painful for the entire country, but I also was part of a community that came together and healed together through one of the biggest tragedies of our time. And I remember I was in 4th grade at Columbine Hills Elementary, and up to this point, everything was great. There was no fear. There's nothing wrong with the world. I've got some great parents. I'm on the wrestling team and the football team and the baseball team. And I'm at school at Columbine Hills at recess. And all of a sudden, I feel this different energy that I've never felt before. as teachers are running around and they're rounding us up and they're lining us up to go back into classrooms, and they have to lock us in the classroom. I don't understand what's going on. And my teacher is like listening to a radio behind her desk. And, I didn't understand at the time what was going on, but my mom was like a super mom. She was one of the first parents to come and pick my sister and I up. And I remember, you know, very clearly on the way home that, they were talking about it on the radio, but they didn't even know how to report this thing, and I remember my mom saying, they think they're gods. Like that's a memory that's drilled into my head. And I don't even understand death really at this time. And then we're at home and, it's going on in the news. And I'm like, oh, my sister goes there for basketball practice. And fast forward, a kid that used to jump us up and down on the trampoline at my best friend's house, his neighbor, he was killed in the shooting. And my sister's camp basketball coach was Dave Sanders. He was the teacher that was killed. And I don't talk about it anymore as something that was damaging to me. I remember there was a shift to where I got a quick reality that everything isn't always gravy. But I went to Columbine after that. And we were a really strong community.
Oh, I bet.
We came together with like a chant. We had Coach Moore would come out and the whole community would be there. He'd be like, "We are Columbine," because it was like this, we needed to come together. And I think that's the message that America needs to understand, is that we need to come together as a community now around all of the different things, not just, school violence, but there's a lot of different kinds of violence going on, and division and polarity on things that we don't even have to fight about, because there's so many things we can agree on and come together on as a nation, as a community, as a human race, And I learned that very quickly from the Columbine incident. And, the principal is a good friend of mine. The principal that was the principal at that time, he was my principal. And isn't it interesting that very few people, I actually don't know of any teachers that left after that. I had a lot of teachers that were there during that. Why is it that they would stay? It's because two evil people with an evil plan and something evil in them did a very evil act. And that didn't say anything about who we were. And people will have their own, it was the first thing that they reported on. So of course there's this story over here and this story over here. Hey, why don't you blame this parent or this kid over here that was bullying someone? As if bullying isn't going around every single school right now.
Everywhere. Yeah.
And I think that if we would come together to solve things with love instead of solve things with fighting, we would get a lot further with all the issues that we're dealing with.
Honey. I want to say so many things about that. Like it is completely true. And we watch, unfortunately and fortunately, because I'm in the relationship I'm in with my sweetie, my spouse is on air all the time, and all we have to do is watch the news, and all we have to do is find all of this in our living room. We put in some like rules and regulations between the both of us, not just like this is what you're going to do, mister. No, it was just like, we need to keep our living room like a happy and healthy place that doesn't only just talk about the negativity that's going on in this world, because there's a lot of really good stuff that's going on.
Amen.
Amen. And you guys are going to hear amen a lot from this man on this show, because it's his favorite word. And I love that it is. So let's move on from Columbine, though, because let's get into where you ended up in your darkest hour in your life and how you kind of got there, because there's a lot in there that we cannot cover. And I read his book and it's a lot, but let's chit chat about a little bit of that, and then how you ended up slinging your arm full of drugs.
Yeah.
We'll just go there. You know me. I'm not going to just sugarcoat this.
Yeah. There is a lot in there. There's a lot that you could definitely point to and blame my addiction on, right?
Sure.
I could definitely point to the Columbine shooting if I wanted to and blame that. I could point to, the shooting that happened at a party when I was in high school and blame that for causing me to do things. What I've come to realize is that I am the cause of the things that I do. I am the cause. And I think that I've chosen in my life, I've chosen to not let trauma continue to traumatize me. I've made that choice for a reason because, as you've said, I've been through a lot of stuff. And I went through a time period where I blamed this person for something. I blamed the person that introduced me to cocaine at 12 years old for ruining my life when that wasn't the case. I continued doing all of these choices. I continued going down the path. I continued partying and everything until September 28th, 2008, when I had been out drinking and partying like most nights my freshman year of college. When I woke up to my phone ringing and vibrating down by my leg. And I swam through the soft sheets with the hard phone with the bright screen, and it read 4:47 a.m. and my best friend Chucker was calling me. And I remember having the conscious choice that I could either answer the phone like I always do with, "Hey, what's up, Chuck?" Or I could answer with the way I was feeling, with, hello. And in my still drunken state, I chose the latter, to which a soft voice replied, "Hey, what's up? Why are you calling me this late? I was just calling to say hi. Don't call me this late again." And I hung up on him, and he shot himself. And for nearly a decade after that event, I was unable to share that phone call with anyone as I bottled it down deeper and deeper and deeper with drugs and alcohol. I was no longer using drugs and alcohol to party and have fun. At that moment, I consciously started using them to cope with the way that I felt, to cope with, life and events as they come at me and everything. I didn't have another coping mechanism. And that's what I can say. But in reality, I've got to take responsibility in that moment. I should have talked better to him, A. B, I should have reached out to somebody and told them what happened and worked through that. And my trauma started to circle my choices more and more and more and more, because at one time, I had to have drugs to live because it was my solution to the way that I felt. But then it switches from, I'm choosing to consciously use them to be my solution, to a shift later on where they're no longer working and they're the actual problem that I no longer have a solution for. So a lot of the stuff that you read in my book, it was a direct result of my addiction. And something that I have made a very conscious decision about is to release blame on anybody else and myself, but to accept responsibility for everything that has happened in my life that has brought me to where I am now, and accept responsibility for everything I do now into the future for where I'm going to go. And again, I still experience things come up. Like when the shooting just happened, at the Christian elementary school, right? When I hear about them still, and I don't know why, but I have to go watch it. I have to go watch what's going on and hear the story and try to figure out, why was this person hurting so bad that they had to go commit this? And then I'm thinking, and then I start remembering all the, the crying and the stuff from when Columbine happened. And my heart just goes out to every community that is affected by this. And that's what it really is, I think. It's just, I want to love everybody that's hurting. And I think we should all have that heart,
Yeah, no kidding. Do you, when these events that have continuously occurred, obviously since Columbine and over the past couple of weeks, we've had many of them, many of the months. And it's just like what we do here in America. How big of a trigger is that for you? And does it bring you back into a state of like maybe a triggering a moment, maybe feeling like, oh my gosh, this could relapse me in any way, shape, or form? How do they make you feel besides what you just mentioned?
So in reality, the word trigger didn't even exist in recovery until treatment came around. That was a monetized program that wants you to relapse and come back. The entire message about recovery at the beginning was about how you can recover once and for all. And as long as you live by a certain set of principles and you are constantly focused on helping others, there is nothing that could trigger you. We literally used to talk about, at the founding of recovery, how we can go anywhere any other man goes without the fear of drinking alcohol or without the fear of what's going to happen in there. As long as we have a purpose to go somewhere, we're good. And that's how I feel. There's nothing, I don't get triggered to use drugs. I don't get triggered to drink alcohol. I get triggered to, go down a path of that collected hurting. I want to hurt with them just to send my heart out to them. And I don't know why it is. Whenever I hear about a shooting, I spend time studying. Because if I only look at the victims of any of these shootings, right? I look at them and my heart goes out to them because I know what their families are going through. I know that community feeling.
Right.
what about the person that committed it? What needs to happen for that person? Because that's the person that's actually missing the love for this to happen. There's something that needs to happen for the people that are committing these things. We need something that stops these things by loving people, and protecting. Like, there is no doubt that with the way that America is now, schools should have a very good guard system is the way I'll put it.
Well, yeah. And I mean, and that's really, really sad. But I mean, and earlier you were talking about the fact, like, in our schools, like, we weren't used to any of this. I mean, we're approximately the same age. Like, I had earthquake drills, all of my nieces and nephews, all they know from 4 years old to 17 years old is know how to deal with a shooter coming into their school and what they need to do for a response to that. That's what they're learning. And so there's such a huge disconnect for me to even rationalize what that would be like for a teacher, for a school, for the students, for the families, and all of that. But you brought up a very good point that the victims are not just the people that have been killed or harmed or the family members that are around it. Now you're talking about the person who did the actual act, and their family, by the way, is really affected by that kind of behavior. Can you imagine? Like, that's my son that killed 18 children. Like, and where did that come from? And the stuff that they have to go through in order to process that part of it. But I don't want us to go down on this whole slippery slope of all the shootings and all that. I would like to circle back to your addiction and stuff, because that's where you are now. You're in recovery from some pretty gnarly shit.
Yeah.
So can we talk a little bit about some of your darkest hours and some of your finest hours? Because I know that, like, using didn't just like happen overnight. It typically doesn't with people. Oh my God, I'm an addict. Great. Well, that was fun. It started on Friday and now it's Saturday. It doesn't happen that way, guys. But can you talk to us a little bit about your addiction and probably some of your darkest places? Because out of the darkness came a lot of light for you.
Yeah, 100%. And the reason why I talk so much about love is because it's what solves everything for me. It just solves it when I look at it from a place of love. And like I was saying, after my friend's suicide, it just kept getting darker and darker and darker. And what I didn't share earlier is that at 10 years old, I gave my life to Jesus, and this whole time through my addiction, I'm making all these bad choices. I'm doing all these things and I'm super ashamed and all this stuff, but I never lost my faith in it. I just didn't even understand what it really was. And this whole time I feel like I love God, but how could he possibly love me? And I remember this time I was, and I was able to like make good money in my addiction. I was breaking door-to-door records with a needle in my arm. And I got to a point where like companies would give me an apartment, pay my rent, pay my bills, and then, pay me every week for sales that I was doing. And I would get bonuses and all kinds of stuff. And it was in 2016. I was in a corporate housing apartment, and I was sitting at my desk and I had this syringe that I had loaded up, and I was looking at it and I didn't want to use it. Like my addiction had gotten to a point where I was using drugs against my will. They used to solve the problems that were going on inside of me. And now I'm looking at this thing and I don't want to use it, but I know I'm about to because I have to. And I start crying and I'm looking at it and I remember like really distinctly how this syringe was magnified through the tears in my eyes. And it was like this blurry object that I was allowing to take everything from my life. And I set it down on the desk and I put my hands in my face and I started crying and crying. And I heard a voice from behind me say, pray. And there's other parts of my story where like I hear God's voice in my heart. But there was an actual voice outside of me that said, pray. And I turned around me and there was nobody there. And I just put my face back in my hands and I started crying harder and harder and harder. And it said, pray again. And I got up from that chair and I started limping over to my bed, and not from physical pain, but just this emotional pain from all the things that I'd been through. And I dropped down on my knees and I put my hands up and all I could get out was God. And in that moment, in my darkest moment, I felt arms wrap up from behind me as if to hug me and say, I love you right now, the same as I ever have and the same as I ever will. I felt it. I was relieved of all that stuff that was going on in me. And then I got up from that prayer and I walked over to the chair and I shot up And now if that's the case, right, that this love is infinite, that God is giving me, right? That's a moment that has helped with my philosophy of how other people should be treated wherever they're at. I don't look at somebody due to anything about them or anything that they've done, thinking that they don't deserve the same love that I deserve and I got, right? I don't deserve this love and I got it. So if somebody else doesn't deserve it, I need to give it to them because I got it, right? And that's a dark point where I was able to bring that into the light, right? But I still suffered after that. I ended up calling my boss, getting ready to kill myself. And I told him, dude, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't work anymore because I'm making all this money and I'm just putting it in my arm. I'm going to kill myself. This is how it's going to happen. I'm going to die, making all this money alone in an apartment somewhere. So I quit the job and I go up to Montana and I become homeless because at the time I can't even find treatment. There's no treatment that'll accept me in. I can't get health insurance because I've overdosed before and the hospital makes a report of this. So I can't even get private insurance. I make too much money for Medicaid and I don't make enough money to pay for $35,000 a month of treatment. So I'm in this weird place where I can't get help. And, it was difficult.
Talk about fucking limbo, dude.
Yeah. And it's really crappy how that's set up too. And I was just going over this yesterday with somebody that is in my course. Like, she makes perfectly like $800 less than what she's allowed to make to get Medicaid. If she makes $900 more, in order to have insurance, she has to spend half of her salary.
Yeah.
How does that make sense?
None of it makes sense. None of it makes sense at all. But man, okay. So, I mean, because I know that in your book, you talk about suicide, obviously. You also talked about an interesting part, and it was more in the beginning of it, where you were like crazy about child molesters. And how
I haven't talked about that in a long time.
Well, you had me read the book, so I read it, babe. I'm like, this isn't in his questionnaire, so I'm going to go after it because it's not. And the reason I bring it up is because I have been through a similar situation, not in regards to child molesters, but I have been in a situation that I was so obsessed with figuring out how I was going to end somebody's life. And I know it sounds scary and to listeners that I would even have that in my heart and my soul, especially who I am. But something that happened to me that was so off the charts, I was like weaving and formulating, and it was keeping me up at night, like trying to figure out how it was going to end this person's existence and probably anybody that was involved in that person's life as well. And the fact that I was capable of having those thoughts was really, really scary. And a lot of that came in drug and alcohol induced state. So, but when I was reading your book about how you were like formulating ideas on how you were going to go out and fill in the blank of what I'm going to say.
I thought my purpose was to be a child molester serial killer. Like, I was going to I was planning on using all the money that I'm making to get the tools and things and find some kind of place where I can, at the time, I mean, I'm a drug addict. I'm hanging out with drug addicts. I love people. So I'm like asking them questions about their life and stuff like that. And it starts getting to a point where like, I start asking them about, what they've been through. And then I start hearing about their traumas from when they were a kid, horrible, horrible things. And then they let me know, yeah, he's, nobody knows. He's never been in trouble.
Of course not.
And hearing that over and over and over. And my heart was in, like, I want to put quotes in the right place.
Mine was not. Mine was not in the right place. Yours was.
Because at the time, I wanted to express my love for the victims as much as possible.
Yeah.
Because it just angered me so much. And it got to a point where I was consumed by it, consumed by the hatred to where it overshadowed the love of what I wanted to do for them.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, I got to this point, I was driving, out to South Carolina, and I was driving alone and just making these plans and everything. And I'm like driving with my knees so I can sit like this, like with my hand on my chin and ponder how I was going to make this happen. And then it was as if in a moment, the Spirit of God left me to let me know where I'm headed. And it was like,
Huh.
I just felt, whoa, like, this is not right. This is not right. Something
This is
is
not
wrong.
right. I
Something is
should
leading me.
not be a serial child molester killer.
Yeah. Yes.
They're
And-
not going to be selling t-shirts on the side of the road for me. No.
So it leaves, and I feel this emptiness that I haven't experienced since I was 10 years old, right?
Yeah.
And I haven't experienced it since. But when it left, then all of a sudden it was like it flooded back in, right? It flooded back in a moment to show me that is not where you're headed. The way that you show love is to love the victims. Do everything you can to love them and help them, support them, help them with whatever it is that they need. And forgive, which that was the last group of people, because I did work around mass shooters. I forgave them before I was able to forgive child molesters. And as a group of people, it's a really powerful place to come from when you can forgive people and look at them as a flawed human that is suffering also. Because if we look at everybody where we need to get revenge, if we look at people where they're wrong, so we need to let them know they're wrong, then we're never going to solve things together. But if we look at everybody as a flawed human being and we try to understand where people are coming from, what their worldview is, what they perceive as what's making them think this way, then we can come from a place of, oh, I understand you. You know what it's like to ask somebody questions that completely disagrees with everything you believe until you get to a point where they really feel understood and heard. Like you really care about what they're saying because you do. And you guys can come into an understanding like, hey, that's why we disagree on this thing. You want to talk about this thing?
Yeah.
You want to talk about this thing over here?
What about
We can
this
agree
thing
on?
here? What about this thing here?
Yeah, because it's a way of agreeing with each other.
It is. And
We
I
both
think,
understand.
yeah, and I think that the message of love is a huge one. And it's one that I've always spoken about. I've had my moments where I have not shouted love off the top of the rooftops, but I totally agree. And especially in our space with politics, we're not going to even go down that road right now, because that's that place where it's very, very hard to be loving in that gross like space that we've created here in the United States, where it's like, ew, everybody's against each other. And it just should not be that way. It should be a place of love. It shouldn't be a place of divide. But when it comes to, and thank you for not becoming a child molester serial killer. I appreciate that.
I don't know if I'd be here right now.
There might be some people that are like, damn it, Adam, I wish you would have done it. Go further. No, but I think that even though it's really hard to take the step aside and look at the other person's side of it, there is an element of them being a victim too, because we never know what's happened to somebody else. We don't know what trauma has happened to them. And we talk about trauma and trauma-informed approach to care and everything on this show. And we talk about every episode, and I will continue to do so. But I don't want trauma to be a crutch either, because we can't blame traumas that have happened to us on all of our actions, on everything that we do. And that's because that happened to me when I was a little girl. Oh, come on, give me a fucking break. Like there is a time and a place where trauma has come into my world and has come into my life, and things that I've had to persevere through. Some of it has been addiction. Some of it has been sex oriented. And now it's turned into my bod with my pain. It's crept into different places. Am I blaming anybody? Not actually, I'm not. I have 25 people I'd like to. However, that's not helping me out at all. It's not helping me out at all. And so when I came to a place where, and it happened over the past couple of years, where I had to shift my mindset on how I was going to approach my approach to care, how I was going to approach myself, and how I was going to manage my pain, my trauma, my sadness, my depression, my anxiety. How was I going to do it for myself? I chose to let all of that stuff go. And some of that was very hard. And I know that you've experienced it as well, as we had to get rid of people in our lives. We had to say goodbye to some people. We had to clean up some of our kitchen. We had to go through our spaces that were like so deep and darky and spider webs everywhere. And we had to clean it out and do all of that. And we've done that. And we've worked very hard to do that. And we've worked to go to a place of love. And I love that about you, because You can just feel the love out of this guy like all the time. Is awesome. But what I'd like to talk about really quick, because I know that we're going to start creeping on time, but what I'd love to talk about, and I know it's an icky space, but people like to hear this because they want to hear that hope story of where your darkest hours were and some of these places that you were at. Because in your book, you talk about driving across the country and you were like, I have enough dope to get me this far. And then I know where I can find it when I get there. And then I know where I can find it from there. And all of that darkness and despair and all of that navigation of and a manipulation of your day and your life and all of this to get your next hit, to get your next drink. And I understand it, not from a drug perspective. Well, I kind of do from a cocaine perspective. That was many, many years ago. But yeah, I was like, oh God, I need to spend $100 today because I'm going to blow through that again. You know, like, and figuring out how I was going to manipulate my life around how I was going to get my next hit, how I was going to get my next drink, what have you. So I understand that. But can you tell us just like, I don't know, give us one or two stories of some dark shit because we're sick and twisted in this world. But also, and I like to hear that because you're so positive and you're so uplifting. You've been through so many things, but I like to show that through that darkness, you have come into such light. And that is one of the reasons that you're here. And I love that about you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amen.
Well, amen. Yeah. Well, yeah, there was a time in my addiction where for a long time I thought I could hide it from everybody. But then, you know, as I'm losing weight, my eyes are rolling back in my head when I'm sitting on my friend's couch and they ask me if I'm high and I say no. You know,
not at all. Nothing. I'm good. I'm just a little low in blood sugar.
Yeah. You know, it got to a point where I can't lie to people anymore. And then I was working door-to-door sales, doing well. I was in Montana. I had a girlfriend at the time and all this stuff. And I was hiding from her that I was still using. I went over to her aunt's place where she was staying. And I was with her for a little bit and then let her know I have to work in the morning. So I'm going to go back to my hotel. And I drive around the corner. And what I didn't tell her is that I'm going to shoot up first. And I made a shot and I put it in my arm. And at first I was upset because I thought it was bunk. You know, I didn't feel anything.
Ugh.
But then I start, you know, driving off. Next thing I know, I'm waking up on the asphalt in a pile of glass with blue and red lights around me and cops and paramedics. And I ended up getting a couple felony charges because I had a little amount of drugs on me and I was in a car. And in the courtroom, 4.5 months later, I had to watch a video of the body cam footage of my own dead body being pulled out of a car without breath or pulse. And you would think that having that vision in front of you, you would think that that would be enough to make you stop. But I suffered for 2 more years after that, exactly 2 more years after that. And that goes to show, you know, people that are suffering an addiction, they need to know not only that it's possible, but they need to know that there is this life on the other side of addiction that is beautiful and worth working for. Like for so long, I didn't think it was possible for me to find freedom. I literally did not think that I was ever going to get clean. I thought I was going to die an addict. And now that I've found it, I had this click at 26 days sober where everything changed. I no longer desired drugs and alcohol. First time since I was 12 years old. And when that switched for me, it became my mission to help other people find that freedom with everything I have in me. My purpose is to, in as many ways as possible, show people it's possible and help people achieve it. By doing that, what I found is it keeps me in this state of, you know, I'm not getting triggered by stuff. I can literally, in my recovery, I can't tell you how many times I've gone down to where I used to pick up dope, talk to my dope dealer, who is super proud of me, talk to his customers and let them know my story, talk to them and love on them and stuff. Same place I used to pick up dope. Now, I'm not suggesting people in their first year of recovery that haven't done the work and like really know themselves go do this. But when you have a purpose inside of you to get out there and help addicts and you don't allow that garbage saying, if you just help one, it'll be good. That is crap. Help as many as you possibly can for the rest of your life.
Yes. Amen.
And there's this thing that I coach everybody in my courses. And, you know, in our addiction, we create these neuro highways, right? When we wake up in the morning, we have this thought like, I need dope. First thought, boom. And then our brain is consistently working on going to get dope until we have dope. Then we put it in our arm. We have this big dopamine release, right? And that's what the addiction is. We have to keep chasing that dopamine. We have to keep chasing that and chasing that. I do something called a why statement, a personal why statement with everybody in my course. And they say it morning, afternoon, evening. And I tell them, keep a card and read it as much as possible, because on our second call, you have to be able to say it from memory, you know? And if that's the thought instead of I need drugs, the first time that you really help someone find recovery, you will experience a euphoric feeling that you cannot find through any artificial means. You cannot find the feeling you get of helping someone else anywhere else. You can get to a place where you just want to do it over and over and over and over. And it's not like, for me, it's not a dopamine hit. You know, I help people all the time because I know it's what I'm supposed to do. I love doing it. I love seeing when somebody's eyes literally just like flicker as something changes in their mind, you know, and they're like, oh my gosh, I had never thought of it like that. And then their life and their action and all these things change for them, you know? And it's just something I don't want people in recovery to miss out on, because they're told that they need to work on their triggers. They need to work on avoiding here and avoiding here. When in reality, if you focused on all the beautiful things you can do in your recovery, all the things that you get to work on again that you lost, you know, maybe you used to play basketball. Maybe you had started playing the guitar and you never really got good at it because you had to pawn your guitar.
But I think it's an interesting way that you talk about triggering, because I know that it's kind of turned into like a phrase now that everybody uses, like, oh my gosh, that's such a trigger. I can't go over there. I'm like,
yeah.
Come on, really? We're going to brunch. Like, what could trigger you here today? Like, okay, if there is something that quote unquote would trigger you, how do we approach that? Like, how do we go about quote unquote the triggers? And how do we maybe change our focus and shift on how our viewpoint is on what a trigger might actually be? Because it might actually be something beneficial to us instead of something that would harm us. And I say that just from personal experience, because there's some stuff that I've had to face that I would say would have been a trigger prior to some childhood trauma, that instead of looking at it that way, I decided I'm writing a book about it.
Amen.
Instead of it having it be this like gross space, I'm turning that pain into purpose, right? Which is what you've done. And I think that's great. And another thing that I want to talk about before we head out is you talked about working with people, right? And your courses and all that. So can we talk a little bit about that part of you and what you're doing to help people in recovery?
Well, number one, you know, when we're talking about triggers, usually it's some kind of trauma, right? And your trauma can be your superpower or your kryptonite. If your trauma from the past is able to trigger you to act out of character, to act in a way that you actually are not, then that means that you need to focus on the work that is going to make that thing not a trigger anymore. I'm not ignorant to the fact that there is a lot of work to do around childhood trauma. I'm not ignorant to the fact that I had to do a lot of work around Chuck's suicide and around all of the things that I've been through. But I'm not going to go into trauma work expecting to do it the rest of my life. I'm going to go into it with a healing mindset. What work do I need to do to heal this part so this doesn't continue to show up in my life? And this is the really sad reality about trauma. If trauma is still triggering you and it's still able to damage you, that exact same trauma will continue to show up. It will show up again in your life. You will see it more in front of you. You will hear stories of it more in front of you. If you're not doing the work on it and getting it out of that kind of thinking, I hate to use the term, but positive thinking, you know, but it's real. The thoughts become things, and the affirmations and stuff. And I had to do a lot of work to make it so I'm not thinking about killing myself, because my best friend killed himself. And that started a whole thing where I wanted to kill myself for years and years and years and years. I don't want to kill myself. I have no desire to kill myself. I had to do work around that. And it took me a while. So if you have a trigger that is really just causing you to act in a way that you're not, do the work. You deserve it. You deserve to do the work for yourself to get past that and, you know, find freedom from it. And that's kind of what Recovered on Purpose does. And the way that we do it is we do work together in the community, right? We share our stories with each other. We get out the darkest parts of our stories. We get out the best parts of our stories, and we learn how to tell them and everything. And we do it in a way where we're releasing the power it has over us to be our kryptonite. And then we're turning it into a superpower to use the digital age now to reach addicts out there with our stories that are suffering. Because right now, if you're sitting in an AA or NA or CA room, and just to make it very clear, I love my fellowships and I love every single person in the fellowship. But if you're someone that is sitting in there waiting for people to walk in order to help them with addiction, you are missing so much opportunity to help people. We have videos that are reaching. One of my video of my overdose has been seen by millions of people.
I know, and I'm
Millions
one of them.
people. And
I was like, what the hell is happening right here?
right. But if that's the case, I mean, and there's all kinds of different ways to reach people. I mean, we have no idea who this podcast is going to reach.
Yeah.
And if someone listening to this right now is struggling with addiction, email me at adam@recoveredonpurpose.org. And I would love to help you. You know, that's the way it works.
And Lyndsay at thepaingamepodcast.com.
Say it again. I think I was talking over you.
Lyndsay at thepaingamepodcast.com. Yeah, because this is what we're here for. I mean, we're not just like, oh, let's just spitball and hang out with Adam and Lyndsay today. No, there is a reason that we are here. There is a purpose that we are here. They might be a little different in nature, but we still align in 90% of the reasons that we're here. We're here to help. We're here to give hope. We're here to spread our stories of sadness, of hatred, of scariness, where we want to go kill people. Like, you are not crazy, okay? There are two loving people that are here for you and will be for you, whatever. Like, reach out. And I know that a message that we've had together is to not be afraid to share your story. Because our stories in so many cases, we all share so many stories. And if we don't share the same story with each other, you know somebody that does. You know another person that knows somebody. It's the 6 degrees of separation. You know, we are here to help each other. We should not be here to hurt each other. Granted, we all make our mistakes, but we can fix so many of them. And I mean, like, even if it's here with me and you on this show, if there's one person that we've touched, if there's 20 people we've touched, hopefully we're groping 1 million of you right now, okay?
Yes.
There is freedom, you know? There are other places to find it outside of addiction and self-loathing and shame and guilt, you know?
Yeah.
We can let go of these chains.
100%. And I found the most freedom that I've found is not when I experienced the freedom myself, but the real freedom happened when I started helping others find the freedom. If you have found the freedom from addiction and alcoholism, you don't know the freedom yet until you've helped others find that freedom. You know, like, each one teach one. When you know something, when you've actually learned something, is when you can actually teach someone else that. So I encourage anybody, and that's not just for addicts, anybody listening right now, this is my message for everybody. If you have been through something that you thought was going to break you and that you would never get through, and you made it through, there is somebody right now counting on you that is going through that thing right now, and they need your message.
From Chains to Saved, Adam Vibe Gunton. Go buy his book on Amazon, From Chains to Saved. You can find him at FromChainsToSaved.com. He's on social all over the place on Recovered on Purpose. You can find him all over the place. I will put him in show notes and in social media. Thank you so much for being here with me today, and for saying amen as much as you do.
Amen. Thank you. I tried not to say it, but I had to.
Oh my God. You said it plenty of times, and I did too. No, I love it. Thank you so much, Adam. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Lyndsay.
Thanks for not dying on us. All right, buddy?
Amen. Yeah.
Amen.
Sorry.
I'm apologizing for saying amen. You are exclusively invited to share this Chains to Saved, freedom-finding VIP pain journey together. Let's get to the heart of how to heal with you by my side. Do you know someone who is living in and with chronic pain or addiction? If you do, send them our way here to the Pain Game Podcast and to Adam. We are here for you. I would love to connect with you and hear your heartfelt stories of strength and wisdom and awesomeness and perhaps some sadness as well. We're here. Please follow the Pain Game Podcast wherever you digest your podcast content. We will be there. Visit us on thepaingamepodcast.com and follow us on all the socials. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Thanks for listening, my little VIPs. Catch you on the other side.